I never heard of this company before, but it was in business for over 120 years. So let's see what adventures this story holds on this episode of Antique Bottle Stories. Our story is about David Jayne. He was born in 1799 in Pennsylvania. His dad's name was Ebenezer, and he was a Baptist clergyman who wrote a Baptist hymnal book and many essays. But David decided to practice medicine. This 1937 article states that Dr. Jayne had been practicing in Salem, New Jersey for the last 12 years, and now was removing to Philadelphia. Now the first ad that I find is in 1937 for Dr. Jayne's Carminative Balsam, which is supposed to cure all diseases of the flesh, but also a remedy for diarrhea, dysentery, cholera, and a few others. Now this 1838 shows that Dr. Jayne also distributed drugs from other manufacturers as well. This one is from Thompson's Superior Trust. Look at some of the names of these ailments: tetters, ringworm, salt rheum, scald head, Jackson, and barber's itch. I looked some of them up. Tetters and salt rheum are similar to eczema. Scald head is when your hair falls out and dried discharge causes scales on your skin. I couldn't find what Jackson is, but I did find that barber's itch is a fungal skin condition under the beard. Okay then. I bet we're all going to sleep better tonight knowing all that. You're all welcome. Here in 1842, he's taking up a bit more space for his ads. Here in 1844 is the first pictorial ad. The left side is a close-up, and then over on the right side is it's zoomed way out. You see all the little yellow highlights? It took up an entire column and a half with all the testimonials. Here in 1859, here's a list of his products. So let's look at Dr. David Jayne's household in 1850. He's 50 now. This is his second wife, Mary. His first wife already died. A couple years after this census, Mary died, and then he marries a third time. He had children with all of them, somewhere around 10 children in all, I think. His third wife was about 30 years younger than him. She was the same age as his oldest kids. He ended up having kids right up until his 60s when he died. Here's the 1860 census with wife number 3, 6 kids are living at home, and 5 domestic servants. And I just noticed that 4 out of the 5 servants are named Margaret. He also mentions that his real estate is worth $700,000 and his personal estate is worth $100,000. Now the city directories don't begin until 1861 on Ancestry, so this is pretty late in the game. In another 5 years, he's going to be dead. So here's some of the family listed. Him, his son David Jr., his nephew, Eben C., and John Walker is his brother-in-law. Well, they're all working together. And it's at 242 Chestnut Street, which used to look like this. It was very grand. It even had Jayne at the top up there. But we'll talk a little bit more about this building in just a minute. In this 1866, it says David Jayne, well-known proprietor of many large granite and marble buildings in this city, is lying at the point of death of pneumonia. A few days later, he died. He reportedly left a $3 million estate. Here's a photo of his mansion. I don't know what year this is, but the guy here posted a quote saying, "This great white marble mansion, still unsurpassed, has been one of Philadelphia's most noticeable structures for a generation. It was the last of the buildings erected by the late Dr. David Jayne, the most widely known Philadelphian of his time. His preparations were used in every country of the globe." Well, I tried to see if this mansion still stands. So 19th and Chestnut is this corner here, and no, I'm afraid it's not here anymore. And I don't know its fate. So let's skip a couple years, and we see in 1871 David's widowed wife, and also the widowed wife of his son David Jr. We see that it's still called David D Jayne and Son, now run by John Walker and Ebenezer Jayne. Still on Chestnut, but not for long. The following year, 1872, the building caught fire. It says about 9 p.m. on March 4th, the fire department was called. Flames spread from the 3rd floor to the 8th floor. It says the height of the flames rendered the fire engines useless. About 11 p.m., flames were shooting out the top of the roof. It also started to spread to adjacent buildings. It says the prospect of saving the splendid block from total destruction are almost hopeless. It says Shannon's tea store next door is deluged with water. A large stock of tea and coffee is ruined. After 1 p.m., it says the tower that stood at the top fell into the building with a crash. It says this building was built in 1849, completed in 1851, and was said to be the finest and most imposing business edifice in the country. In the days following, the papers report that it is with deep regret that the fire completely totaled the building, and the hope is that David Jayne's sons will rebuild. Here's an 1890 directory, so almost 20 years after the fire. Ebenezer is still running the company, and it looks like John Walker is no longer there. Maybe he's died by now, I don't know. But it's still at 242 Chestnut. So I looked it up, and as you can see, there's a bunch of construction right here. So I can't see the numbers, but this building says 233, so it seems that this building would be in the 240s. If it's not, there's a really big gap in the buildings here, so I don't know. Here's something in the paper a couple years after David Jayne died, talking about how in 1855, a certain person named Cameron had successfully bribed his way into the Senate, and Dr. Jayne claimed that he had just as much money as Cameron and sent off his lobbymen with 30 grand to attempt the same thing. It says it failed because their stupidity made them fat victims of sharks. It says this was found out afterwards after an investigation was launched. It says prosecution was avoided by Jayne and Paxson taking refuge in Her Majesty's Dominion of Canada. So Dr. Jayne's nephew, Eben C., died in 1900 at the age of 73. Now the ads continue through the 1900s and 1910s. It doesn't specifically say who's running things here in 1910. Here's 1923, and it looks like there's some new products. Here's some lozenges called Jaynex. Here in 1931, this says that the 1932 almanacs are ready for distribution. It says, if your druggist doesn't have one, just write to Dr. Jayne and Son in Philadelphia and they will send you one. So apparently they sold almanacs for many, many years. This one is from 1873 and it says the 30th year of publication. So that means it started in 1843. Here's 1924 and it says 81 years of publication. So for this 1932 to say it's ready, that would make it 89 years going. So then I was wondering, when did these stop? I went and looked it up, and apparently the last publication was in 1940, so it lasted 97 years. And over that time, they estimate that they've sold over 500 million almanacs. Here's a 1939 ad for the product that's in my bottle, the Tonic Vermifuge, used to treat parasitic worms. By 1950, it doesn't look like it's called that anymore. It's called Jayne's PW for pinworms. It mentions on this ad that fidgeting, nose picking, and tormenting rectal itch are often signs of pinworms. It says 1 out of every 3 people examined have it. The last ad that I see for Dr. Jayne anywhere is in 1965. Wow, I gotta say that is some serious longevity right there. So here's my bottle, Dr. D Jayne's Tonic Vermifuge, 242 Chestnut, Philadelphia. So we know he didn't start production at this building until 1851, but this looks later than that. It looks about 1880s into the 1890s, early 1900s at the latest. I did find some older versions of Dr. Jayne's bottles online, and these actually say 84 Chestnut Street, so these are much earlier. Here's another one, and this one actually looks paneled. So there's about 120 years of variations out there. And that'll do it for me today. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching, guys.